Hey everybody, Kent Dobson here from C3. Thanks for joining us this morning for another online teaching. Really appreciate it. This online community has been very life-giving over the last year and a half, so thanks for being a part of it. A couple of just sort of news items, exciting things that are happening here at C3. Next week, July 4, so July 4th weekend, on Sunday we'll be gathering again in person. We wanted to kind of take our time a little bit, getting back together and see how comfortable people felt. Our last in-person gathering was a huge success, so thanks for coming. And we're going to do it again, July 4, so please come. If you're kind of new to C3, but you live in the West Michigan area, I want to invite you to come to the community center, 10 o'clock in Grand Haven, Michigan. We'll be there, so we'll be gathering in person. That doesn't mean our online teaching and music will stop. It will continue. So right at 10 a.m., just join us on Facebook. It will go live, the teaching and the music and whatever else we have going that morning. So stay connected that way if you can't attend C3 in person. And of course, that will later get posted on YouTube if you watch us on YouTube. So that's next week. Then we'll continue for the rest of July, we'll continue online. But starting the first Sunday of August, we're going to return to in-person gatherings just at the community center in Grand Haven from that point on. So pay attention to the newsletter. That's where you get all the information, both kind of looking down the road a little bit and what's coming up immediately. Also any sort of key announcements and other ways C3 people are involved in the community. So that's on our website. If you're not a part of the newsletter, sign up for the newsletter on our website, c3westmichigan.org. Also, we're in the process of kind of retooling our website and making it a little bit more user-friendly. So look for that in the coming probably month-ish, couple months. I think that's really it in terms of announcements. If you've been joining us, you know that I'm in the middle of a year-long series. I see the end already, called Meaning Matters, where each month we take a look at a different word. And the word for this month is goodness. I hope you have enjoyed this month. I have particularly enjoyed the guests that we've had at C3. And I want to kind of offer a few sort of closing thoughts on goodness before we turn the page in July and look at a different word. So I want to begin with a poem, a William Stafford poem. William Stafford is quickly becoming one of my favorite poets. And in some ways, I love him because of his plain language. There's such richness and depth and nuance, but he speaks in such a plain way. It's very subtle. It's a little like how Robert Frost sometimes uses very plain language to communicate something eternal and vast and timeless. So here's a poem by William Stafford called The Little Ways That Encourage Good Fortune. Wisdom is having things right in your life and knowing why. Wisdom is having things right in your life and knowing why. If you do not have things right in your life, you will be overwhelmed. You may be heroic, but you will not be wise. If you have things right in your life, but do not know why, you are just lucky. And you will not move in the little ways that encourage good fortune. The saddest are those not right in their lives, who are acting to make things right for others. They only act for the self. And that self will never be right. No luck, no help, no wisdom. So I don't know if I want to say a ton about this poem right here at the beginning because I want to read it again at the end. Sometimes I feel you're just getting started upon first listening to the lines of a poem. So I want to read it here at the beginning, and I'll close also with this William Stafford poem. But what I like about it is the straightforward question of, do you have things right in your life? Do you have things right in your life? And do you know why? Or are you just lucky? Things are right in your life and you're just lucky, but you're really not that wise. Or worse, your life is not right, so to speak, and you're going around trying to make everybody else's life right. That's the worst. And you can probably think of, maybe you're like this, if you're really honest, or you can think of people in your immediate circle, or you can think as the circle widens out wider and wider to the broader culture, the culture is filled with people who really don't have their life right, and they don't know why, and they're going around convincing everyone else that they need to change their life. So it's a poem about wisdom, and it's a poem about getting your life straight. Getting your life right. And as soon as you ask that question, get your life right, kind of the postmodern overculture, the little whisperings, we could say, start to creep in. Well, is there such thing as getting your life right? What would we mean by right? And do I have the right to say that my life is right and someone else's life is wrong? Those little inklings of the postmodern milieu context start to weigh on us. Sometimes unconsciously, I think, now that postmodernism and modernism, it's all mixed up, has been around for a while, it creeps into our way of thinking. And I remember when I first encountered postmodern thought, in some ways it was a relief, because to use my friend Peter Rollins' phrase, he says one of the things that is happening in the larger culture, is a kind of epistemological humility. I like that word. Epistemology, of course, is how we come to know. And one of the gifts of postmodernism in general, as opposed to modernism and early Enlightenment thinking, is epistemological humility. All right, let's calm down a little bit and be humble about what we think we know, or be humble about how we come to know anything at all. And even in the scientific community, which we tend to think about as all about facts and certainty, there is tremendous epistemological humility in the scientific realm. Those who are actually doing the work, those who are working in the quagmire of physics and mathematics. There's a lot of epistemological humility happening there. So what's my point here? My point is, that's a gift. That's a gift. It also, though, has a kind of trickster side to it. In the possibility of epistemological humility, being humble about what we know, we then conclude, well, there's nothing to know. And I can't be certain about anything. And there's no such thing as right. There's no such thing as wrong. There's no such thing as evil. These are illusions. There's no such thing as good. There's no such thing as goodness. And here we are, struggling this month, turning that word over, goodness. And that's where I think things are going awry right now. And it's always even a schizophrenic message, especially in progressive circles, liberal circles, university circles, where there's a lot of how we can't be certain our knowledge is the right knowledge, or there's even such thing as knowledge, and then finger pointing like, well, you and your worldview is definitely wrong. And it's backwards, and it's archaic, and it's patriarchal. I'll try to hackle some feathers here. How can these two things be true? There's no fundamental ground of meaning in our linguistic soup. So a word like patriarchy has no meaning then out of the same mouth. Well, you're patriarchal. So words are giving us problems right now. And we're experiencing a kind of confusion, and I'm not here to clear up that confusion, but I want to speak a bit about it. In some ways, just to skip ahead, I am suggesting that epistemological humility, how we know anything at all, is to be embraced in our era, in our age. And I certainly want to be that kind of person. But I don't want to get stuck in the quagmire of there's no such thing as truth, there's no such thing as meaning, there's no such thing as goodness, there's no such thing as beauty, there's no such thing as truth. I want to remain even humble about that, if I can. And I think that kind of humility it keeps coming up. Maybe that's one of the big lessons of 2020. Are we going to take the massive cultural invitation offered to us by the complexities of modern life, by the pandemic, by the global economy, by climate change? Are we going to take the massive invitation to humble ourselves, to allow our Icarus wax-jointed wings to melt a bit and come back down? Maybe we can come back down instead of crash into the ocean like in the Icarus myth and die. So just to skip ahead, yes, I think epistemological humility is absolutely essential. And it's related to the William Stafford poem, because just think about the struggle it takes, both personally and I think collectively, to struggle with this question. Wisdom is having things right in your life and knowing why. Wisdom is having things right in your life and knowing why. That means you have to struggle with what's the right way to live. And right away we want to take, well, what's the right way for me personally to live? See, we're kind of comfortable with that. We're a little uncomfortable with, does that broaden out at all? And I think that is one of the struggles that we must struggle with in the 21st century. I just thought of another poem, a line from another poem, a Drew Dillinger poem, something about hieroglyphics or hieroglyphs. I don't remember the title, but here's the opening line. It's 3:23 in the morning, and I can't sleep because my great-great-grandchildren are keeping me awake. My great-great-grandchildren are coming to me in my dreams asking, where were you when the planet was plundered? Where were you when the seasons begin to collapse? See, that's a broadening of the perspective of the right life and of goodness. And that's entering the collective question, the we question, not just the I question. What is right for me, but what is right for us? And that's hard. That's challenging. That's like getting your life right and knowing why. That's it's sort of made its way into popular consciousness and spiritual circles, but that's that indigenous question. What is right for the next 7 generations? Apparently that's a native tradition. I don't know which one. It might be Lakota. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Or it might be Cherokee. I can't remember which. We make decisions for that affect the next 7 generations. And that's not just indigenous in the sense of Native American. That's also in the Bible, by the way. The sins of the fathers reaching 7 generations. That's the same way. That's the same kind of consciousness, actually. Maybe that's part of indigenous consciousness. Indigenous means of a place, of a region, of a bioregion, we would say if you want to use fancy language. And the Bible, believe it or not, is an indigenous book. I know it's been co-opted by Western powers, by Western, well, at one time, the Catholic political and religious engine that made its way into the political cultures of Europe and other places of the world, of course. But originally, it was an indigenous book. It was a collection of tribal wisdom. And I'm not, here to just to worship that, but I'm saying, or to look back with nostalgia, but I'm saying it was rooted in a kind of earth consciousness, and earth consciousness is very aware of cycles and generations and 7 generations. So Anyway, what's my point? My point is that's a broadening of the question of the good life and of goodness. Wanting to live a life of goodness, the invitation is to be less privatized about that. So I want to mention something that Ken Wilber brings up, and just briefly. So Ken Wilber, believe it or not, likes to talk about a circle. And just go with me sort of conceptually for a few minutes. So in this circle, you have the I, the we, and the it. The I, the we, and the it. So sort of divided into thirds. I, first person, we, that's us, and it, which is the objective. So you could say subjective, and then you have the plural, and then you have the objective here. So I, we, and it. Here's another way of saying it. And this is where I think things get interesting. He's like, these spheres also correspond to art or beauty. I think that's probably the better way of saying it. Beauty, morals, and science. Beauty, morals, and science. So again, beauty is I. So what is beautiful to me? That's the subjective. And to live a life pursuing beauty, this is, I think, a profound and deeply human enterprise. What is a beautiful life? What is a beautiful way of being? What is beautiful? Why do human beings, from cave paintings to cathedrals to their own living rooms, arrange and move things, or to even their own desks? Sometimes I sit down to write, or sit down to the computer, or sit down to make a podcast, and I'm arranging things on the desk because aesthetically, it's not quite right. And I'm not really thinking all that clearly about it. I'm just moving pieces around. Maybe you know that feeling. So that's the realm of beauty. That's the realm of I. It's the realm of art. It's a third of what we're asked to wrestle with as a human being. So, and then the other category is morals or ethics, you could say. That's the we. Okay, on the one hand, I want to pursue a life of beauty. On the other hand, well, what is beautiful to us? What is good to us? What's the moral, ethical, best way of being in a social group, in a culture, in a context, in a family group? You cannot skip the morals. Even if you want to say there's no such thing as universal truth, there's no such thing as a universal moral, okay, you've just made that claim, which of course itself is a universal claim. So you're already caught in the quagmire of postmodernism. There's no such thing as truth is an absolute truth claim. So anyway, back to morals, you could say there's no such thing. What's moral for you is that's moral for you, and that's different than what's moral for me. But as soon as we stretch that out, we start to run into problems. And some of the darker things that are happening right now in our culture, right now, hidden behind the materialistic culture of goods, is a very dark world, like what's happening in North Korea, where massive starvation is happening right now, where something like concentration camps are happening right now in 2021. And I'm about to go real dark here, darkness warning, about to go PG. If you just think about the 20th century, 6 million Jews killed, something like 20 million Russians, 20 million Russians killed with an ideology that looks out for the marginalized. That's Marxism. Trying to create an equal playing field, there was a conclusion, let's forcefully make the playing field equal. 20 million. And we don't exactly know, but maybe 40, 50 million Chinese killed in the revolution. So, wow, yeah, this is the modern world. This is the post-Enlightenment, scientifically minded, not mixed up with all that old religious garbage. And this is how we behave. So the question of what is moral, we ought to plague us every day. Maybe that's part of the realm of politics and religion and spirituality, to stay in the game, in the wrestling match of what is good. What is good? Maybe one thing I just want to say in the month of looking at goodness, this question matters. What is good? What is good? What is good? We can still have epistemological humility, but I think we have to wrestle with what is good. And then am I going to live the right kind of life and be conscious of it, as William Stafford is sort of suggesting, hinting at here. So, okay, let me just finish the wheel. So we've got beauty, goodness, and then truth. He puts truth in the objective realm. And the realm of truth is, I think he means, and this is Ken Wilber again, the realm of science, the pursuit of objective truth. Even if you have epistemological humility about objective truth, it's still the pursuit of it. How is the universe structured? How's the universe structured? What's really going on? I mean, I think 2020, all the changing messaging about what is true, how the virus started, where the virus started, it came from bats. This was absolute truth. Definitely bats. Then we're not so sure. And then, maybe it was accidentally leaked from a lab, or maybe it was intentionally leaked from a lab. It's none of us know at this point. I think time will tell. Probably, this is an intuition I have, that in 50 years, we'll know what the virus actually was, how it spread, what was effective and what wasn't. But right now, it's just grasping. But the pursuit of it matters. What is actually the case? What is actually the case? What was actually effective? What is actually effective? What are the effects of the vaccine? We still do not know. Perfectly safe. Trust us. The first thing I think of is whenever the government or big pharmaceutical companies say, trust us, we should definitely trust them. They're never wrong, right? No, we know that. I don't care what side of the political spectrum you are on. We know that the politics and the economics of such things can cloud the pursuit of the objective of what's scientific. So some epistemological humility is needed. And we have to say, part of the whole here, part of pursuing wholeness in the 21st century is being in conversation with all these three realms, with beauty, with goodness, and with truth, with art, personal choices and aesthetics, with questions of goodness and morality and ethics, the we, and how far does that we extend? Not just to my family and my tribe and my ethnicity and my race, but what about even future generations, when we're awoken at 3:23 in the morning and we can hear our great-great-grandchildren coming to us in dreams saying, where were you? What the hell were you doing? And the realm of science and the objective and the truth, and continuing to say, no matter what it is, we want to be the kind of people who pursue these things that tend to then shake up the I and the we. They're in a kind of whole here. So that's just a little Ken Wilber, just to try to put in context, in a kind of conceptual context here, the pursuit of goodness and the pursuit of the good life, as the Greeks were obsessed with. What is the good life? And what's the moral life? What's the ethical life? And I think, it's pretty obvious that American politics is right now plagued with questions of ethics and morality and the sins of our fathers. And how do we treat our neighbor? It's plagued with this. And of course, the two sides, I really actually don't believe in two sides, but I'm just saying two sides kind of metaphorically have their heels so dug in their own rightness that there's not really much of a conversation happening. But morality requires a conversation. It requires an us in which to converse. Maybe the reason why I said I don't really believe in two sides is that every single person I've met or been in contact with or am friends with, once you peel away the initial labels of I'm a liberal or I'm a conservative, as soon as you start saying, well, what about this and what about that? What about this issue and what about that issue? And then it's like, well, okay, I'm not, I can see your point here, or I'm for gun control, but not that way, or I'm against gun control, but I can see, there are nuances. And I think part of what I feel personally responsible for carrying forward from 2020 and now the beginning of 2021 is to treat human beings like human beings and like the complex organisms that they are and like the complex spiritual beings that they are and like the complex moral beings that they are and like complex aesthetic beings that they are. What is beautiful. Yeah, it's complex, and complex family histories and socioeconomic status and perspectives, and reject the red and blue. That's my soapbox for a second. Reject the red and blue. I'm in a blue state. That was a red state, 4 years ago. It's complete nonsense, and it's simply designed to keep our limbic fight or flight systems on overdrive. So I think something like the circle that I just described helps us calm down a little bit. Yep, being a human being is complex, and my personal cultivation of beauty is important, and my sense of we and morals and who is my neighbor is important, and to have all that balanced by truth, by scientific truth, I think, that seems like a more full way of being in the world and of living in the world. Which leads me to one more piece here, which I mentioned in my opening talk on goodness, and I want to repeat it here. As soon as we say there's such thing as a good life, as soon as we say, I'd like to be in the business of goodness, I'd like to pursue a life of goodness, I'd like those in my circles and my community and those who've had a hard time to have more goodness in their life, you admit that there is a hierarchy here. And hierarchy is such a bad word right now. All hierarchy needs to be flattened out. Well, maybe what I would say is that very clearly, there are hierarchical abuses. And maybe all systems are prone to hierarchy, and all systems are prone to hierarchical abuse. And we ought to say, and have the power to say, that's not a good thing. How do we keep that from happening? But to say there's no such thing as hierarchy is different. That's a different claim. And to say everything should be flat, as soon as you flatten out the entire universe, there's no such thing as goodness. There's no such thing as the capacity to say, hey, caring for the earth, not dumping chemicals and plastics and poisons into the air, into the land, and into the water, that's not a good thing. You can't say that because the hierarchy gets flattened out. There's no hierarchy of goodness. No one gets to say, well, so what? It's my life. Like Bon Jovi, it's my life. I'll do what I want, or I did it my way. Who's that? Like Sinatra or something? That's like the narcissistic, egocentric, I-centered worldview popularized, and turned into kind of a vision of manhood, in quotes. If you're listening to the podcast, I just did air quotes. So I think it's okay to wrestle with a hierarchy of values. I think that's a better way of saying it. Do some values outweigh others? Are some ways of treating my neighbor better than others? Are some ways of treating the earth better than others? We're in a real problem when it comes to earth care. And we don't really know what to do. We're starting to realize that individual actions don't seem to be all that effective. Like recycling, in a sense, there was a Rolling Stone did an article 2 years ago, very, very long article on recycling, what actually happens to our recycling. And it was about China and then China shutting down and what's actually happening with most of our recycling is just a feel-good illusion. Actually, all of them are downcycled. They deteriorate, so they're just made into weaker forms of plastic until they just go into the water, into the land, into the hidden particles from our normal vision. And only a couple kinds of plastics can actually be really recycled. It's not so much true with aluminum. Aluminum can be recycled. Anyway, I don't want to go into the details of the article, but it seems to be much more of a way of continuing to not change our habits. But we recycle. I separate things in a bin. Why would I have to change my behavior around what I purchase and where I purchase it and how it's packaged? I don't want to change my behavior. I recycle. I'm good, So, of course, the industry is going to come up with ways of keeping the mask on. We don't want to look too hard. We don't want to recognize that right now, most of what we put in our recycle bin gets burned and sometimes shipped to Oregon and burned to make electricity for large cities. So I'm saying, what's my point? I just got way off on recycling. My point is, it's complex, and we ought to do a little digging. And we're just going to have to say, no matter what we do, on the individual level, it's going to feel pretty small. Some of the biggest decisions around climate and the globe and climate change in particular are really in the realm of industry and politics. And that's why, collective action and collective voices and pressures on industries, and they do make a difference in the world. Land use and permits and things like this, very concrete. But because they're really challenging, sometimes we prefer individual action. Yes, but I drive a Prius. Yes, but I drive a Tesla. And I don't want to look too hard that lithium mining for batteries is one of the most toxic mining processes on the earth. Yeah, but it's a Tesla. It must be good. So I know I'm just throwing. Speaking of the realm of science, of truth, those facts come in and they disrupt. They disrupt us morally. They disrupt us personally when it comes to beauty. And maybe one way of saying is that the Western lifestyle in general is plagued with complexities and immoral actions, we could say. So let's face it. But let's stay on the path of saying, what is the good life? How can I get my life right and be conscious of it and be aware of it? I think that's the challenge of William Stafford's poem here. So back to the hierarchy of values. This is worth really struggling with. At C3, as you know, if you've been around a while, we're a values-oriented, values-based community. We state our values out loud, and we say something like, these are our stated values, and we hope to live up to them. And I think part of the challenge, and I think gift of being a values-based community, and maybe all communities are if they really look hard, what are our values? I think one of the challenges of being a values-based community is that they're continually sort of challenging us and saying, okay, am I living up? Sustainability is one of our values, and what are we doing about that? How are we living? And maybe how am I living, but how are we living? And what are the actions of our of our local governments in Grand Haven and West Michigan and industries. And okay, there we are. Now we're in the conversation. And to be okay with rank ordering some of our values, saying this is a higher or deeper, you could say either way of being than the alternative. And that takes courage. That's what I'm saying. It takes courage. Epistemological humility and courage. Humility and courage. To say, actually, we think this value creates a better world. And but to treat it like part of an ongoing conversation. I think maybe let's return to William Stafford and we'll call it quits here. The little ways that encourage good fortune. Wisdom is having things right in your life and knowing why. I want this kind of life. And there doesn't seem to be an obvious roadmap for getting there. Maybe there are maps, but the actual walking of the terrain is challenging. So wisdom is having things right in your life and knowing why. If you do not have things right in your life, you will be overwhelmed. You may be heroic, that heroic effort, but you will not be wise. If you have things right in your life, but do not know why, you are just lucky. And you will not move in the little ways that encourage good fortune. That's a challenging and I think somewhat difficult to understand line. I don't think I quite get it. Let me read it again. If you have things right in your life, but do not know why, you are just lucky. And you will not move in the little ways that encourage good fortune. So you're sort of living in blind luck, but you're not making those decisions that might increase what he's calling good fortune. Or what I might say is goodness more broadly in my life and in the life of others, because we lack wisdom. We're just lucky. The saddest are those not right in their lives who are acting to make things right for others. Think about that. That's fundamentalism in all its many forms, religious fundamentalism in the various religions, spiritual fundamentalism. That's conservative fundamentalism. That's liberal fundamentalism. That's progressive fundamentalism. When you really look at the individual life, it can be a total wreck, no wisdom, complete hypocrisy, we could say, but this mad marching toward making everybody else's life right. So let me read it again. The saddest are those not right in their lives, something is amiss, who are acting to make things right for others. They only act from the self, I might add here, the small self, the egoic self, the narcissistic, tiny self. And that self will never be right. No luck, no help, no wisdom. Thanks for joining us this morning. Be sure to share this video, this teaching far and wide, especially if you heard a hint, a guess, a clue that, I don't know, is helping you in your own spiritual life, however you might personally define that. But share it. Share it in your own social media platforms, on your own Facebook page. Send an email to a friend because I see C3 as the kind of place that's trying to be in conversation with meaning. After all, our series is Meaning Matters. And we all value, or we all benefit from the broadening of that conversation. So I wish you well this week. I'll see you in person July 4 at the Community Center, and you can also join us online. That will be available online, 10 a.m. And then looking forward already to August when we'll gather more regularly in person. Peace.